My name's Bernard Martin. I tell you what, it's Bernard Martin, and I used to be an architect in and around Newark. And so I sometimes do a talk on Heritage Open Days where we do a walk around the town. And I point out the timber frame buildings, which is basically what the subject matter is. So today it's winter time, and it's not quite so pleasant here. So I'll do the talk here, and then at the very end, if anybody wants to come out, we'll have a little bit of a cruise around the marketplace and do it that way. So this is one of the buildings that I would normally visit. It's called the Governor's House. I'm going to get the notes because I can't remember dates. And
sorry about that.
Very good. So what happens? They've cut the timber down in the forest during the winter. It was a winter job you could crack on with. Cutting down oak trees is a pretty tricky business actually. So winter time, the advantage is there aren't any leaves on the trees, which about halves the task. So you cut the timber down in the forest, in Sherwood Forest, which of course this is where we are. It's called Sherwood because it refers to the Shire. It's the Shire wood. And that isn't so much to do with trees and things, it's actually a legal thing. That the forest was a land that the king had direct control over. And he could pretty well do whatever he wanted, including obviously all the hunting and all that sort of thing. But also, he could chop people's hands off for stealing a mouse and all this kind of stuff. So that's what Magna Carta is all about. Magna Carta, and the next one following that was the Charter of the Forest. And that severely curtailed the king's authority. And it's all to do with the forest. So the obtaining of timber in this sort of quantity, it was pretty well, you might think of it as a state monopoly. You couldn't go down to the builders merchant to buy your timber. It had to be acquired by all sorts of means, difficult, and there wasn't a good supply, but that's how it worked. The first priority, of course, was the Navy. But if there was a war on whatever, then obviously they got priority. So it's actually quite difficult to get the timber you needed. So you're in the forest, you've ordered your building, whatever, your carpenter is there, and the buildings, this is the bit that people often don't appreciate, a framed building is prefabricated. It was actually assembled in the forest, but each of the frames of the building was assembled flat on the ground. That's why you have the shape of the building as it is. So if we think about the front range of this building, there'll be one frame at the very end, one at the other end, and in this case there are two in between. So in this case, what I'm talking about a frame is the bits that go up to the first floor, up again, the big timbers up across the roof, down the other side, and the big floor beams in between. So if you can imagine that, all assembled flat on the floor in the forest. All the mortises and the tents are all cut out, and it's even pegged together. And then, like any good IKEA pack, it's numbered because you don't want to get it back to where you're building it and the bits mixed up. And so, not so much on this floor, but on the floor above, it is possible to see the carpenter's marks from when it was made. And it's all done with what we call Roman numerals. Actually, they're axe marks. So if it's frame number 1, then it's just one stroke of the axe on each of the uprights. And then if it's the second frame, it's 2 strokes, and so on. And that's how it's numbered. Then it's disassembled, taken apart, and carted from the forest to where you're building it. But by now, it's getting into spring. And the weather's improving, and the roads are just about passable. And I don't know if any of you are literary connoisseurs, but if you ever read Thomas Hardy, The Woodlanders, now that's a lot later, that's only sort of 150, 200 years ago, so that's like Victorian times, but it was much the same. There's a really good description there of the guy pulling these logs through the forest, his horses and the cart, and he meets the lady, the posh lady, and she won't go back either, and he won't go back. There's a standoff. But he couldn't reverse, because you can imagine it, a team of horses, maybe 4, maybe 6, pulling these logs. It's quite an operation. The reason I'm talking about it is because the most of the cost was actually in transportation. And that's another reason for chopping the frame, making the frame in the forest, because it was as light as possible. You didn't want to be carrying tree trunks through for miles of countryside, bad roads and stuff. If the beams are half the weight, then that's what it did. So you got them into town, you built the foundations. This building for this period is a bit unusual because it has a cellar. And the cellar's underneath the front range again, that part there. And it's quite extensive. It's built of stone, look at the walls. So it's, again, quite a substantial building. And then you start to erect the frame. Well, the frames are 1, 2, 3, 4, and the pieces in between. And then you start to fill in the gaps. I mean, we don't know what's on the other side here. Obviously, those buildings weren't there. You can see on this side a really good example, though. That stonework there is called limestone. It's local stone. Not very great quality. That's why it's all falling apart on the outside. And start to fill it in. So this building's very unusual in that this is called a hall here. There was no intermediate floors. It's just as you see it. So this was the main assembly room in the building. Where we're sat now actually was a carriageway from the marketplace or the street all the way through out to the back here. And so in recent years it's been, this is very recent, but this is all original, but this, instead of being part of the inside, would have been where the carriages came through. The supply and all that sort of thing. You can imagine that.
And is all this wood, is it actually original?
Yeah.
And there's been no disease?
What, of the timber?
Of the wood, of the timber.
Yeah, well obviously, like for example, this one, you can see, it is a more recent repair or replacement. So this is new, but it is oak again. The other thing about working oak is that once you cut it down, it's very wet, and oak is has what's called tannic acid, which is quite aggressive, but it means the timber is relatively soft for about the first year as it's drying out. So that's another reason for cracking on and getting your carving, straightening the timbers, all that sort of thing done. As regards disease, it's pretty tough oak, but it is vulnerable if it's persistently wet. Excuse me. If it's totally saturated, as they sometimes are below ground, that's okay, because bacteria and worms and stuff can't get at it. But it's when it's sort of sporadically getting wet. I can see there's been some damage here. Probably too big to scratch it, but then it is subject to rot and to worm. And death watch beetle is a particular one, yeah. But if it's dry, people are trying to work out all sorts of remedies for beetle and all the rest of it, and they've never really been successful because you can't get them into the timber where the problem is. The only solution is to keep it dry. You've probably seen, the Palace of Westminster, House of Parliament. Well, the Great Hall, which stands just in front of us on Parliament Square side, one of the best panel beam roofs in Europe. It has this problem of worm infestation. And throughout the 20th century, people kept coming up with amazing recipes, all sorts of toxic stuff that's going to fix it all. And it rarely did, it just killed the people who were doing it. But the solution is to fix well, it wasn't actually effective, I don't think, because you can't be all there, you have bad news there. But, I mean, for example, I've seen timber buildings where a piece of timber, say, as big as this, on the face of it might look okay, but then when you actually start to take it apart, it's actually almost like a pipe. And the death watch beetle has eaten away all the way through it. It leaves the outside looking, pretty well okay. So you have to be very careful. But the story is, it's like any property. You look after the roof, you look after the ground, hat and boots, and you protect it. What to say about this building? But on the upper floor, you've seen the plaque on the outside. It refers to an argument. Dating. People often ask, well, how do you know? That's down to the last year when a building was built. Because, we're talking about a long time ago. And there's this new science, well, as you call dendrochronology. What it amounts to is tree ring dating. So this is a slice out of a log. This was cut down 2 or 3 years ago. It's in my log store at home. What I've done, I've just penciled in where the tree rings are, so they're easier to see, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And I'll pass this round so you can see it. Yeah, we'll start at that end. Is to notice that the tree rings aren't all the same width. As we go out from the middle, they change. Some are quite wide, 2 or 3 wide ones, then it gets narrow and wide ones again. So what's happening is when a tree grows, the stuff in the middle, the wood, that doesn't grow. The only thing that grows is on the outside. It puts more and more layers just below the bark. So the sap and the roots now are all delivering the good stuff out of the ground, and it's within that slice between the wood and the bark. During the winter, it grows slower, as you'd expect. So the timber that's made, the cells, are actually a slightly different colour. They're darker than the ones that grow in the summer. So in the summertime, it's growing fast. The sunlight and all the rest of it in the heat. And so what happened in that summer and winter is effectively recorded in that ring. Good summers, bad summers. And of course, it isn't just that tree. Every tree in this locality, or any locality, has got pretty well the same kind of weather experience. That there will be immediate differences because, as you see, some on one side of the tree, it's grown out, say, that much from the centre. On the other side, it's grown twice as much. Well, that's because it's probably shaded on that side. But the pattern remains the same. So if you have a building whose dates you know through another source of information, say there was a charter or something, that you know that building was built in, say, 1500. If you can get a record of the tree rings from that building, you know to the year what the pattern looks like.
Does water affect it?
Well, only in
Does
as
water
much.
affect the rate of growth? Oh, the rate of growth as well.
Yes, if there isn't enough water, the tree will die. It would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it'd be the same for all the
Yeah.
trees,
Yeah.
roughly speaking, in that locality. So if you can go to the building whose date you know and get an idea of what the pattern of tree rings is like, you've got yourself a reference. And the way to do that is to drill into one of these chaps, and they take out what's called a core. So the drill is like a tube. It's not like a drill like that, it's more like that. And you pull out a stick of timber. And hopefully you've got the middle, where it started growing, and the very outside. And the trick is to find a piece of timber that's even maybe got a trace of the bark on it. Usually the carpenter is careful to take the bark off, because that's where the rot begins. But if you've got a piece with the bark on, that's the year that the tree was felled. Obviously it didn't grow anymore after it was felled, so you've got a date then, or you've got a ring, where you know the tree was felled. So if you could compare that pattern with a known building, for your building, you can determine the date that it was actually, the date you find out is the date the tree was cut down. And then from what I said before, you know pretty well that they're going to be building it within a year. There are exceptions to that, and I'll talk about one in a minute. But generally speaking, if you've got the date the tree was felled, you've got the date the building was started to be built. So that's actually quite accurate if you can glean that information. So an exception to that, they found, I don't know if you know Carter Gate? There's a nice timber frame building, very attractive, where the lady with the curtain shop
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Teresa.
Yeah. Well, that one, they found that there were, strangely, contradicting what I've just said, there were two lots of dates, and they were 10 years apart. Give me time for me to consult my notes. Right, 1344, 53. It's about 10 years apart, 9 years apart. And of course, that coincides with the Black Death.
Yes.
So what it's thought happened was they were all busy getting the timber, all ready to crack on building, and then you know, they had a bad COVID, if you like, and nothing happened because a huge slice of the population, died. Terrific tragedy. And then they cracked on building it again, so it's a 10 years gap. So that must have been tricky because the timber by then had been hard. So that's true dating. If anybody wants to follow it up, there is a document that the University of Nottingham, their laboratory, put together, and it shows all the significant timber frame buildings in Newark with their appropriate dates. It was redone about 10 years ago, because, and interestingly, it puts back most of them as being at least 100 years older than had originally been thought. So that's quite interesting. So what about this building?
You told us about the plaque outside when the coffee starts.
Yeah, and I'm not a historian. Yeah, one thing to do with, oh yeah, I want to talk about the building. Yeah, okay, right. It mentions the Civil War. Newark, sort of, there were two big events, it seems to me, happened in Newark. That King John went and died in the castle. As my wife keeps telling all the kids and stuff, they believe he died on the toilet. Poisoned at Sleaford, the lampreys, whatever they were. He overate the shellfish or the lampreys, whatever they are. Like an